Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent. Our today's topic is The World is Too Much with Us by William Wordsworth. Dear students, you have known that we already have completed the extensive study of the poem in our last lecture, but today we are doing the line-wise explanation of this poem. Before starting the line-wise explanation, I must revise the reference and the context of this poem, that these lines are sonnets, the 14 lines of poetry, and these lines are written by the romantic poet William Wordsworth. In this sonnet or in this poetry, the poet criticizes the people who have become materialistic and take interest in worldly things. So he blames the people for being away from the nature and most indulged in the materialistic worlds. That's why the poet is now hopeless and he wanted to relive in the old times to enjoy the nature. Now come to the lines of poetry, line 1 and 2. The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. So the speaker begins, the world is too much with us, with this term, the world, and the reader quickly begins to understand what that term means in this context. He is talking about the worldly cares and concerns such as money, possession, and power, and he concluded that is too much with us, meaning that we care far too much about these worldly things. Here are two parts of one line is in first, the world is too much with us. So by the world he means that the materialistic world we are concerned with. So we are in want of getting money, power, and possession. So the poet is talking about that world in which we want the materialistic things. And in the second lines, too much with us means that we all care too much for these materialistic gains of the society, because this poem was composed in 1802. That was just the start of industrial revolution in England. So in that industrial era, the people were indulged to earn more money and to spend more money, and they didn't care about the natural objects and natural things. That's why the poet criticizes the time that the people were just indulged in materialistic gains and they did not care about nature. These lines give more depth to the thought or an idea that when he suggests that by using our time, minds, and energy in getting and spending, you can see the second line, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. So the poets mean here getting and spending mean getting, earning, and spending, then spending the money. That we lay waste our powers. So we waste all our time in getting and spending of money. In these words, poet has the people have power beyond that, which they have tapped into because they are so busy getting and spending. The people just they just waste their time. They just give time to earning of money and spending of money. Then they spend money and they go back for earning and then spend again. So they are tied up with this greed of getting and spending the money, and they and their time is accounted by for their actions of getting money and spending money and caring for their possessions. So he believes that money and worldly possession are far more important to people than they should be. So the people of that time gave much more importance to the worldly things, to money, to power, and all the possessions of the time, and they did not give importance to the nature. So the poet here means that they are giving extra time, they are wasting their powers over these useless and unnatural things, and they are not getting interest in nature. He continues in these lines that little we see in nature that is ours, we have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. In these lines, the speaker contrasts nature with the world. He reveals that while people spend their time in acquiring worldly possession, the true beauty of the earth cannot be owned, and he reveals that very few things that people see in nature actually belongs to them. And he then laments, we have given our hearts away. He believes that where we should enjoy nature, though it is not ours to own. Instead, we are filled with greed and we acquire wealth and worldly possession rather than enjoying nature. The speaker then continues by describing the beauties of nature that people are missing out on by being so caught up in the want of money and possessions. Okay, in these lines, little we see in the nature that is ours. That's mean that we are enjoying less the nature, the natural beauty that belongs to us. Basically, the natural beauty belongs to us. This is for us, but we little see. We are not caring much about these natural beauties. of the world. So we have given our hearts away, like we are not feeling our hearts, we have hard-hearted, we have become hard-hearted now, and we are not feeling these things, but we are indulged in the artificial things of the world, and we have given away the natural beauty. A sordid boon here means that these lines appear in the poetry of the Wordsworth. The world is too much with us, which gives the impression a sordid boon. In sordid boons, sordid means dirty, vile, or selfish, and boon is something that is beneficial, helpful, or considered a blessing. So when there is an comparison, or when there are two words but opposite of each other, so this conjunction is called oxymoron. But this oxymoron here means the sordid things that are dirty and vile things are these industrialist and materialistic things, and the boon is beneficial or helpful. So these industrialistic things and material things are not good, these are dirty and vile for our soul, but the natural things that are helpful, beneficial, and a blessing for our heart and for our nature and soul, so these are the natural objects of this world. In line 5 and 6, the sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will howling at all hours. In these lines, the poet has used the personification, where the poet gives the humanly qualities to the sea and to the winds. In these lines of the world is too much with us, the poet, the speaker, describes the beauties of nature, and the most of the people are missing out on. The beauties of nature, the sea, these objects are the moonlight, the flowers, the winds, these all objects are the beauties of the nature. So he describes these beauties here, and the most people are missing out on. Here you can see that the winds that will be howling all hours, the sea, and bears its bosom for the moonlight. So the description of these parts of nature use personification to help the reader to connect with each description, like all these things are connected to the humanly qualities that can give a fuller impression to the reader. The sea bears her bosom to the moon, which suggests an intimacy between the moon and the sea light. When the moonlight falls over the sea, how beautiful looks it gives. So when the wind howls, it gives the wind human emotion. The flowers sleep, giving these parts of nature human attributes, and help the reader to feel this connection with nature. So it paints a picture of a nature and allows the reader to understand that he is missing out on by being caught up by worldly possessions and greed. In these lines you can see that the sea that bears her bosom, the sea is open, it's a white for the moonlight when it falls over it. So this is real a beautiful beauty of a nature. And the winds that will be howling at all hours, all the time when the winds are blowing, that gives a beautiful impression of the nature, but the men forget about all these beauties and are up gathered now. Let sleeping flowers for this, for everything we are out of tune. In this poem, the out of tune is a fuller, the final description of the poem, that we all are out of tune. But for the explanation of these lines, we must have to get the previous lines of the poetry, that we are, he says, are out of harmony, out of tune with nature, like we don't have any relation, any concern with nature now. And with the sea rising and falling in the moonlight, with its surface bosom bare to the moon, with the wind, whether it howls at time throughout the day and night at all the hours, or whether it is silent and still, but we do not concern with this thing, we do not mean with this thing that how sea is open and how the sun and the moonlight falls over, how the winds are blowing. So everything is still and silent for us because we are not feeling this. And whether it is silent and still, like flowers that have closed their petals, sleeping flowers. By sleeping flowers here mean that flowers that flowers are sleeping, the flowers close their petals, and we all are out of tune and with all these natural things. So it moves not. It moves us not because it has no emotional effects on us and our spirits. So we have lost our connection with it because we cannot feel the natural objects. It moves us not. Great God, I would rather be a pagan suckled in a creed out one. In the previous lines, the poet has mentioned about the beauties of the nature, the moonlight, the sea, the winds, the flowers. So the poet says that it moves us not because it touches us not. It does not affect us all these natural beauties. So now he's appealing to the God, great God, I would rather be a pagan suckled in a creed, outworn. So these lines are the speaker's final exclamation that we are out of tune with nature because we are so caught up in the worldly wealth. Here, the speaker swears on oath that he would rather be a poor pagan than to be distracted by the worldly weather so as to render himself unable to enjoy the true beauties of life. So he appeals to God and even exclaimed that he would rather be a pagan than to be out of touch with nature. Now the poet reflects back to the old time that he wanted to become a pagan. The pagan is a person who is an idolater. So in here it doesn't mean that he wanted to adopt the time. Okay, these lines are the final exclamation by the poet where he appeals to the god that he wanted to go back in the times of the pagan, where he wanted to enjoy the natural beauty and he did not want to live in this rich era of industrialization. Rather, he would like to become a pagan and go back to the old times where he can enjoy the natural beauty. The line 11 and 12, so might I stand on this pleasantly, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. In these final lines, the speaker reveals that if he were a poor pagan, if he had lived in the old times, he would have the glimpses of nature. He can see the natural objects that would give him joy and hope, or at least make him feel less forlorn. He would rather be poor and helpless and connected with the nature and then rich and powerful and alienated from it. In this time of industrialization, that people have become more rich and they are enjoying the more facilities of life, but the poet appreciates the nature and he wanted to go back of the time of the pagans. So he wished here in these final lines that he wanted to go back to the old time of poor pagan, where he can enjoy the nature, where he can look at nature and where he did not feel lonely, and he would rather live a rich life in old times. In the final lines, have sight of a Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton below his red horn. The speaker implies that he had been a pagan. Perhaps he could imagine being in touch with Proteus, or at least catching a glimpse of him as he stares out across the sea. Triton was a pagan god that was said to be able to calm the waves of the sea. And this implies that the speaker looks out at the sea, enjoying nature long enough to see Triton and Proteus. The speaker refers to these two pagan gods after the first appeals to God and swears that he would rather be a pagan than alienated from nature. So in these lines you can see that have a sight of Proteus rising from the sea. These two gods were the gods of the one god is for telling fortune, and another god is for controlling the waves of the sea. So he wanted to go back, the poet wanted to go back the old time where he wished to see them when they were rising of the sea, and at least through this he could not lost his touch with the nature, and he appeals to live at that time rather than to live the lonely life in this present era of industrialization. So the poet wished to go back to the old times to enjoy the nature.